Hello and welcome to my video. It's been a while since I made a video because I've been doing some 3-day events, and I also took some time off because I wasn't feeling awfully good, but I'm feeling better now. And what I thought I'd do, if you look at this picture that's on the screen now, this is the one that started the ball rolling for me. It's called The Illusion of Detail, and I thought I'd do an update. So this is The Illusion of Detail Mark II, and we'll just see how it goes. So it's a very relaxed sort of painting. There is no detail in it, hence the name, The Illusion of Detail. And it's, I know I always say things are easy, but it is really very easy. So I'm going to start over on the right-hand side here, but so let's start. So 2/3 sky, 1/3 landscape. It's always a good sort of rule to stick to because it works. These things aren't just done, or these well, okay, I'm a bit of a rule breaker, but there is something about the proportions of 1/3 land, 2/3 sky. Now this is poking up a little bit high, but that's all adjustable. The top of that little hill there, that can change in an instant, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm building up textures and contrasts. You must have contrast, as I always say. This isn't as big as the one I put on the screen a moment ago. And there it is again for you to look at, just as a reminder, because not everybody remembers everything they see first time. So it's going to be a slightly squashed version. In fact, just to give you an idea, well, let's put a bit of humour in this thing. When I painted the original, I said that I'm painting on board. I was actually extremely tired when I painted it, to the point where I didn't know I was painting on canvas. So ignore the bit where I say I'm painting on board. This place obviously doesn't exist at all. It's just shapes that I think will make an interesting landscape. Okay, so I want a tone. Move the brush sideways and quickly, you get a tone. If I move the brush slowly, like this, I will get a build-up of colour, and it will be darker. So there's a sort of darker spot, and I can turn that into anything. It could be a tree or a hill. If I want it to be a tree, then I would do something like this. And the edge of the brush, you see this, always think of it this way. This is just a little brush, but it's one brush, 2 brushes, 3, 4, and 5. So you can interchange. Let me just show you a little bit of how you can interchange. So I've put a little bit of brown on this side. Brown is the red ochre, by the way. So if I want to put a bit of a stain on the landscape that's got a bit of red in it, I just concentrate on the right-hand side of the brush. The thing about green, the reason I put the brown in, green on its own is not the colour of land. Green has to have red in it, and the red that I use is this red, which is red ochre. And there's a little bit of a stain in the landscape just for later on. So what I'm not doing, it's always good to tell people what you're not doing, because even though you're not doing it, sometimes you need to point out that you're not doing it to make it clear that you're not doing it. So that bit of brown will start to work when I do something like this. There's something in front of that brown field when I do that. And what I don't have to do is get a brown colour and paint it in between everything that I'm going to put on this bit, because it's already there. Think of everything in layers. So this is a layer, and the sky is going to be a layer. Now the sky is going to go obviously in the sky part, but I'm not going to worry about how it cuts into the land, because there's no need to worry about it. Simple as that. And I'm not using much oil. Again, I always do this, but if I do this, no oil comes off. And I just have to say that not only is no oil coming off here, but it is not also coming off on my student who is sitting just there. And Larissa has come all the way to Australia to not have paint chucked all over her. So we'll try to do that, or not do it. So, little smudge in the sky. Now, to some people, that would be the end of the painting. Oh, you know, I've got green in the sky. How am I going to get rid of the green? Well, don't get rid of the green. Just wipe it. It's just a little bit of a stain. And you can paint over that, particularly with blue. Blue is always a very good, strong pigment. And I'm not sure, I think it's to do with the size of the granules of paint. They're very small, so they get into everything. And in fact, right behind my student on the door, there is some blue marks. And I'll show you later. They're quite small. But one of my students came here. I don't know how she did it, but I think she must have arrived with blue paint on her. And it's never actually come completely off. So as you can see, things start to appear. Now, it's very difficult to make them not appear. For instance, so I've got a little lump here in the landscape. Let me just finish off this edge because it'll be more obvious what I'm going to do. So over here, I'm just going to put a hill, and on the top of the hill there's going to be some trees, there's going to be a light field under the tree, a couple of lumps there, maybe, I don't know what that'll be. Maybe that'll be another distant hill. But as you can see, because I'm using the tip and the side, generally I point the bristles at the ceiling. It's a good little rule, that. And it's, you know, back and forth. And if you do this and you're reasonably confident, stuff will just appear. And shapes will draw you into the landscape. Just by putting something like that there. It won't end up like this, but if I just put a curl in the landscape there and some tone over here, the erratic way that I use the brush makes interesting texture. And it just happens that because it's bristle and not nylon, it makes textures that you would expect to see in a landscape. So there's no real hesitation. I'll come back to that in a minute. But this colour in the sky, as I said, it's totally irrelevant what that colour is. For instance, if I get some blue, here's some light blue, royal blue, basically sky in a tube. And if I put that on there, the green becomes irrelevant. It will turn to blue quite effectively. But I'm not worried about that, because in fact I'm going to put white there. So here we go, just giving you an idea of the flexibility. I can just sort of do all kinds of things with that without committing myself to anything permanent. Right, so back with the magic colour. And while I'm doing this, I'll just answer a couple of questions. People lately have been asking me what consistency of oil, what's the ratio of oil to paint? Well, I have as much idea as you do. I don't know. It's what feels right. I want the paint to be mobile but not drippy. So again, I can do this and the paint doesn't come off. I know one day during a video it will, but I'll cut that out and you'll never know. Okay, so the foreground here, I'm going to just sort of have a shape that comes across there. You see, I don't think of it as a landscape yet. It's obviously heading that way, but I resist the thought. Once you, it's like, let me put it this way. If you, and I know people will disagree, Right, so if there's something that you are particularly good at in the painting world, and you can paint it really easily, it just sort of happens. And that's the way it is with me, with particularly landscape. I don't think about it, I just sort of let it happen. If I was painting a portrait and I found them slightly difficult, then what I would do is not think of it as a portrait. I'd think of it as a bunch of colours and shapes that hopefully will make a face. That's just my way of doing it, though. I know not everyone will agree, but that's just how I see it. So the landscape aspect of the thing is irrelevant up until I've finished the picture. Right, I want a darkish shape here. Not quite sure what I'll do with it yet, but I'll do something. Okay. Now in the original painting, here it is on the screen again, you'll notice that the bottom right has a sort of pale patch, and that was just a sort of break so that it wasn't, just too much green. And all I did was wipe away the paint. So I'm going to put some paint on there, like so. As you can see, no great care is involved in doing that. And then I'm going to find a tone that I like, hopefully keeping out the way. In fact, I'm going to move the camera back a bit, up, I beg your pardon. Well, I'm moving the camera down, but I'm moving the image up so that I can do this and keep out of the way, I hope. Okay, so what I want is a sort of bit of land there that's got some interesting tones and colours in it. I don't really want that red line, but that doesn't really matter because it's gone. Now that gives me a bit of scope to put some tree shapes on. Over here I've got this sort of slightly hard lump here, so I'll try and make that interesting. And there's lots of ways you can use paper to make stuff interesting. And if I sort of just do that, the lines in the paint give the feeling of a change in the shape of the landscape. It has a slight basin-y look, if that's a word. Basin-y. I'm sure it's not a word. Now, this sort of hill thing here, I made it a little bit too high, so I'm going to knock the top off that. Okay, doesn't matter what it looks like at the moment. And in fact, I'm going to put some blue and white in the sky. Always remembering that if I have a light horizon, the light horizon will not follow the landscape. If this represents the light horizon, and it's like a band of light this deep, as it moves across the landscape, it does this. It goes behind the hill. One of the worst things you can do is like a light shape that follows the landscape, because it just doesn't happen. So, sky. A little bit of oil, even less than I was using for the foliage. And I'm going to put a bit of white in it. Now the white will give it strength, it'll make it more opaque. And certainly there is, it's really not coming off the brush. Okay. So what I want to do is establish a skyline, a horizon line. And because I'm working up to the landscape, I'm going to use the brush so that I can see this part. This is the business end of the brush, obviously. And I want to see exactly where I'm going to. And I'm not sort of being in any way or trying to be in any way accurate with this. I just want to get the colour down reasonably close to the horizon line that I've got there. Doesn't matter if I pull some green into the sky. In fact, usually what happens is the opposite, because of the fact that the blue with the white is quite strong. It's got a strong tone. Doesn't matter about what happens to the top edge. All I want to do is just get the colour in there. So yeah, blue is one of these colours that blocks out all kinds of stuff. In fact, you know, it can block out an error if you use it the correct way. And when I've got the blue down, then I'll start making the landscape work into the sky. And that's where the effect of perspective will suddenly appear. And I'm not using a ton of paint too. This is all quite flat. I've got a hair in the paint here. Now I know the camera won't pick it up, but the best way to get rid of a hair on a painting is just to do that. And it'll either fly in the air and go on the floor, or it'll stay on the brush. And in fact, I think it's probably on the floor somewhere now. But just hook it like that and flick it. Now it doesn't make much of a mark. If it did, then you just sort of paint over it. There we are. So there's a start of a blue tone. Now, even though if I have a light area, it always goes across, you can actually have a small light area where you may have a cloud for later. So let's just put a little bit of white paint there. And just a reminder, don't worry about the landscape. The more you can cut into it, the better it'll be later. You have to trust me on that. So, just a reminder, this is royal blue. I have some ultramarine on the palette, but I'm not using it yet. Now here, this is where we come up against this hill. See the green on the sky? Basically, it's gone. So it just disappears. Now, when I lighten the sky up here, there will be some clouds. It won't be exactly the same as the illusion of detail, because I'll make some probably slightly more interesting sky. But when you put the blue on, you see, you don't have to sort of. Let me put it this way: it's not like painting by numbers. There is no definite place where you've got to go to. So what I do is I just sort of feather it, just feather the edge as much as I can. When I put a colour next to that, you see, it'll start to blend almost immediately into the blue. So let's just have a few shapes that come up into the sky, into the clouds, which don't exist yet, but they will. Okay, now, this has got brush marks all over it, and you can get rid of brush marks quite easily. Doesn't mean to say you have to get another brush and start smoothing it. Usually what I do is just get a piece of paper, make it reasonably flat on that surface there, and then just move it around in a spiral motion. And of course the brush marks will just disappear, because that's the way they go. That's the fate of the brush mark. And also what I can do, I can say, well, maybe later I'll have a bit of cloud here, so let's take away a bit of paint ready for a cloud to sit. So what I'm going to do is make a space in the blue for a cloud later. So let's just put in a few patches. It doesn't mean to say that I'll definitely use them. It just means that if I do, I've got less paint, and I've got a slight variation in the sky colour. So I'm at the point now in the painting where I start to get an interesting build-up on my hand. And of course, I never use solvents or thinners. But, And as far as I know, I've never had a reaction from paint. When I get paint on me, just wipe it off. It's the same with if you drop a lump of paint on your floor. Supposing you've got a nice wooden floor. So this is quite a, not totally ancient, but an old French wooden floor here. If I drop paint on it and wipe it off without solvent, it's easier. If I use solvent, it dilutes it and it goes into the wood. So wipe it off quickly. And of course you can use soap if you get oil paint on fabric, but no water. Just massage soap into it and then put it in the washing machine. In fact, the soap that I massage into it is usually the stuff that goes in the washing machine. Okay, so there's a blue sort of horizon, and I'll start to make it interesting. Once I'm going to do the sky first, then I'll come on to the landscape. So really, the only reason I've got the landscape like this is just to sort of just establish a general theme, and I'll start to talk about in a moment how I'll get you to look in certain places rather than just leave it as random. So in other words, I'll explain the composition. Now, let's have a lump of blue there, and let's have, I think we'll have some up there for later. Really just that relaxed. You don't have to be precise at all. So here's some ultramarine now. I'm not adding oil because there is oil in the paint that's already there. And another little reminder, the sky at the top of the picture, you have to imagine that this is the distance, whatever's up here is closer to you. So you're standing here and you look up and you see that. The sky is always darker at the top. And I think one reason for that is to do with the, I never get the guy's name right. Is it Tyndale or Tinsdale? I can never remember. The Tinsdale effect, the T effect. If you're looking, Tyndall. If you're looking through the atmosphere into the distance, you're looking through a lot of dust and particles that are floating about, and you're looking through a lot of extra atmosphere. If you look up, you're looking through the thinnest part of the atmosphere, so the colours will be stronger. It's subtle, but even though it may be subtle, you know, there's also a certain amount of artistic license involved. And because it's your painting, you can do what you like. Think of it that you're creating your own world where they just have skies slightly different from the real world. Over here I'm going to put some sort of reddish colours in the sky and make it slightly threatening, because I can't paint a picture unless it's got a slightly threatening sky. Because what's the point? It would just be boring. Let's have a little bit of that there. So, okay, right, now I know that certain teachers in the past have taught you on probably YouTube or CD that you might have bought, but there's an awful lot of teachers that show you their palette on their hand here, up that way. I don't know how they do it without stuff falling off, but anyway, and they'll take a little bit of paint and they'll carefully do this. I'm not going to mention any names. I might want to cut this. But that's not, because certain people do that, doesn't mean say you have to. I prefer the slightly relaxed method, which is what I'm trying to do here. And also the quickest, I think. Okay, so let's get, now this is the bit that freaks people out sometimes. This is where you put brown in the sky. Now I could use a bright red mixed with the blue, but actually rust colour, which is what this is, red oxide, basically rust. And it may seem strange. But something nice happens to it when you mix it with blue. This isn't how it'll look. In a moment, it'll change. Everything changes. And the other thing I probably need to say, because my student might think I'm completely bonkers when she sees what I'm doing with my face. And that is squinting and looking through my eyelashes. And by doing that, I see everything in its simplest form. So I just see dark light. I tend to lose the in-between tones. All I'm interested in is dark and light at the moment. So that's why I pull a funny face, which I will never video. It's too embarrassing. Okay, so there we go. Oh, and I'll tell you what. I'll tell you this. I will be doing another 3-day event. I just did a 3-day event on how to paint like Turner. Now, I'm not saying that I'm as good as Turner. I probably never will. Well, I know I never will be. He was a complete genius. But I wanted to sort of give you the feeling that you could do something similar to Turner. So here's the sky on the screen that I just did in Turner's style. And I have to say, I've never used so much yellow in my life. And it made me realise what a genius the guy was. He could just do it without looking at a Turner for reference, if you see what I mean. Nobody had done what he did before. A lot of people thought he was completely bonkers, but he knew what he was up to. And in fact, it's, a lot of people will agree with me on this, that he was one of the first Impressionists. Anyway, that all went well. So that was a 3-day event. I did a little bit on not just the sky, I did the foreground as well. But instead of it was based on a painting called The Fighting Temeraire, which you can Google. And I didn't have time in the 3 days to paint the ship. I can paint ships, no problem, particularly antique-y looking ships. So here's another one on the screen that I did 30 or nearly 40 years ago. And but in 3 days, it's not for me anyway, it certainly wasn't possible. So the next one though, which is going to probably be in, I think August. I think definitely August. I'm going to do how to paint like Constable. And then eventually I'll do one, how to paint a sky like, who else did interesting skies? Well, actually Rembrandt did a few. Or maybe I might do an imaginary portrait of someone in the style of Rembrandt. But I'm not sure on that yet. Depends how I feel. Right, so anyway, that's enough promotion. So I've added a bit of white to this. So let's have just a little bit of white there. Just for now. That's just something sitting there for later. So, and when I use white, I don't add oil. I'm going to put a little bit of white there too. And I'm putting that on just the board, so it'll be different. It won't have the blue tinge coming through. There'll be a bit from the brush, but it's going to be a lot cleaner and more of a cold grey colour. That means I can do what I like with it later. And some people, I know for a fact, when they paint skies, they like a clean brush, so just a white and then another brush with blue. I like everything mixed in, a little bit of everything. And the reason being, okay, if this patch here, if that's a lump of white cloud, and as I'm painting, I suddenly think, oh, I'd like a shadow under that, I can just turn the brush around, and I can do that. So there's a bit of shade under the cloud, depending where the light is coming from, and I don't really know where the light's coming from. So sorry about the pause there, but every now and then I get this dreaded feeling that I forgot to turn the camera on. It has happened before, but it is going and it's recording. So yeah, as you can see, there's sort of instant cloud. It's not difficult. My student and I had a little discussion about that earlier. It really isn't, and I have been doing it a long time. I agree with that, but if you strip it down, analyse it, what am I doing? What am I doing that is so clever? I don't think I'm clever. It's just putting the colour on and waggling about, and then I think part of it, a big part of it, is the ability to stop and step back a bit and look at it, and then decide whether you need to scrap the whole thing and use it for firewood or continue. So you notice that there's no moulding of clouds. It's just get the colour on there and see what happens. And notice I'm doing all this stuff, okay? By doing that, I'm sort of letting my hand go a little bit out of control. And you can add movement to the sky just by doing that. See, we've got these clouds here, so maybe the wind's pushing it off up that way. It just sort of, slightly flyaway look. Think of flyaway hair. This is flyaway paint. Okay, now when I've put all this stuff on here, whatever I'm going to do with it, I'm going to go over it with a big brush for the first sort of sweep. There'll be several sweeps, and there'll also be a bit of palette knife to get the cloud effect, the twinkly bits of the cloud effect. Now this isn't blue sky that's dark. This is, when I put stronger, darker blue on like this, it's probably going to be a shadow in the cloud that will appear in a moment, as if by magic, I hope, but not too magic-y, because you've always got to keep in your head you can actually do this. I'm not doing anything that's particularly tricky, and that's a mistake. Right, so there's a mistake. How am I going to get around that weird looking blue thing there? It just doesn't look right, does it? So the way I'm going to get around that is to put a little bit of white on it, and as I said before, no oil, and just sort of work from the bottom up and turn it into an interesting bit of sky. There we are. A little something for later. So it's not a tragedy if you do things like that. A little bit more white. And the golden rule: clouds go off the edge. Okay, it's a window that you're looking through, and the clouds don't fit your window view. They pop into it every now and then disappear off the edge. So there's a cloud here like that, goes off the edge. Okay? If you do that, you start to get a certain realism. Okay, so there's a very relaxed first stage sky with some reasonably interesting dark bits in it. Right, after a quick break, which means that I can't figure out what I was talking about before, but maybe it doesn't matter, because I know from experience at this point of the video an awful lot of you have disappeared anyway. But I know I do have some people who are loyal and watch to the end. And if you are still here, please hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button, and if you hit the little bell icon next to it, you'll get a notification when I next put up a video. And comment as much as you like, because it all affects the algorithm, and it means that more people see the video. Right, so I've chucked this paint on, and all I'm going to do now is with this brush. I used to use really big brushes, but it's not actually essential. This is 80 millimeters or 8 centimeters, which for the Americans amongst you, in inches, it's that big. I can't find my ruler, so you just have to believe me. Anyway, you can see how big it is next to my hand. So all I'm going to do, and you'll enjoy this bit, everybody likes this, is this, barely touching it. All different directions. Hold the brush on the end so that it's nice and relaxed, and then just swipe it around, and suddenly you'll get an interesting, slightly blurry sky. And this is just the first stage. I'll be doing this a few times. So there we are, all those brush marks, which actually are quite interesting. I like brush marks, but most of them have sort of been smoothed out. And as you can see, there's not a lot of paint on here. If I wipe that, see, it's more of a stain. There's not piles of paint coming off. In fact, you could wipe this a little bit more as you're going, but I suppose it doesn't really matter. Okay, so there we are. Nice soft sky. Now there's a hair there. You can't see it, but there it is. Cool. And another one there. Sometimes, you know, I leave the hairs right until the end, because you can just pull them out when it's dry and then just varnish. New word. You can burnish the surface with your fingernail just to flatten out the ridges that it might make. Now, some people could accept that as a finished sky. I suppose it's okay. Not too bad. It's got a nice floaty look to it, but I do want to do a few things to it. And then maybe I'll do that before I get back to the land. So palette knife. Doesn't matter what sort, what type, what numbers on it. Most of the numbers are irrelevant anyway, because it depends on the manufacturer. For instance, this is is that a 9 or a 6? I guess if it's that way, so that's a 9. And this is a 5, and there's absolutely no relationship between these two types of palette knife, totally different shapes. So yeah, it depends who makes it. And all I'm going to do is put a bit of white paint on this, obviously, and then just decide how I can make this look interesting. So I think we'll start with a little bit there. And I'm not adding any oil. What I do, that's an interesting one, isn't it? What I do, you don't need the two do's, is try to put the paint somewhere where I'll get some contrast. So here I'll have contrast next to that bit of dark sky there. So if I just get a little bit more, and you can see the difference. If I put that there, like that, it is white obviously, but it won't have the sort of instant effect that you'll get when you put it next to a dark tone. And that's where drama comes from. So if I put, for instance, I've got a little bit here, which I'm not sure what I'll do with that yet, but I think maybe I'll just do that for now. Careful to go off the edge, of course. And then a little bit on the top, because it's worth knowing this. A cloud can have a light side and a dark side, but other clouds near it may not match the same lighting. In other words, light at the top, dark at the bottom, but a cloud next to it may be the other way around, because the light may be bouncing off this cloud and up that way. Bounces all over the place. So don't make all the high spots of a cloud all be the same side, because it usually isn't. And the only way to really convince you of that is to say, put down your brush and go outside and have a look at the sky. Now, it always amazes me how you can get a nice smooth sky without even using a brush. Just a blade. So for instance, I'm going to put a lot more up there because of those dots. I want to cover the dots, right? Because it'll make a change.
The best part.
So there we are. One thing I meant to say, and I think I said it during my recent 3-day event. Yeah, one thing you can do with clouds is if you don't want brush marks, this doesn't leave brush marks, obviously. The other thing that doesn't leave brush marks is this. And I've always liked finger painting. So for instance, let's have a nice pile of clouds along the horizon there. See, you can blend it down below the cloud, bring a bit of the blue up, add a few shadows into it. Let's have a possible thunderstorm on the horizon maybe. I may not keep this, it's just to show you that you know, you can paint something without brush marks just using your hand. In fact, these sort of clouds tend to look good close to the horizon because obviously they're a certain size. Big clouds, small clouds. And this stuff that I put on here with the palette knife, I could just sort of push them around just a little bit before I blur over them, just to sort of make some shapes. And as usual, it doesn't matter what I do, someone will see an animal in the sky. It always happens. Pareidolia.
Oh, yeah.
Fascinating, I think.
Lens of conscious.
You know, the theory I have is that primitive man needed to possess pareidolia so that if they were out in the woods hunting, they were always thinking they saw something, which kept them alert and stopped them being eaten. You know, we don't need it now, unless of course you're in the supermarket, when it's always good to keep your eyes wide open. But I do say the most ridiculous stuff. Okay, oh yes, no, right, I know what I was going to say. You know, I do get these blank spots occasionally, but I think that's probably because I'm Welsh. If I'm basically using my right hand, and I am ambidextrous, I can paint quite happily with my left hand. This just happens to work well with this looking over my shoulder, and sometimes not over my shoulder, but at it. And for those of you who have missed it, there it is. A right-handed person will paint clouds at that angle. A left-handed person, the clouds are usually going that way. So I tend to like to vary them a little bit and just throw in something that's going to break it up, because you know, one of the things about painting, particularly the skies, is to avoid repetition. You've got to have a certain randomness. Okay, so what I'm doing here, I'm going to go over this with the big brush again, but I'm just trying to sort of put in a few shapes that don't make sense. They'll come together later, but at the moment they won't be too predictable. So let's just do a few random marks, like so. So this is the sky at its raw stage. That's looking all right. I mean, so long as I get movement and the feeling of wind in the sky. I also look in the camera here, up there at the viewfinder, because it shows me things like this. That's way too attention grabbing for that part of the picture, so we'll just lose that. There we are. It's gone, and now I've managed to make a face. I can see a face in the sky, directly above there. Let me see if I can point it out on the picture. So that's weird. In the camera it looks totally different, but there appears to be a face there, looking up that way. You can see it in there, but not necessarily here. You see that? I tried to avoid it. Oh yeah, I see it now. I really try to avoid them. Let's just sort of mush it up a bit. I'll get rid of it. All these marks here, it doesn't matter about those, they'll be gone in a second. But I think I've got a reasonably airy looking sky. And it really is that easy. All I'm doing is this. Okay? Anyone can do that. If you played with mud when you were a kid, you can do this. Let's have another little bit there. And something here. Okay, now, what I might do for later is just a little bit of a light spot close to the horizon. So we've got light, well, dark and light. I think next to, what did I do on the original? Okay, I had a little bit of light there. I may have too much paint to do it at the moment. Yeah, I think I'll come back to that with a brush. That's actually quite a wash with paint there, but what I want is a light area next to that cliff. But that can go in at any time. Right, so back to the big brush. And I've got to tear up some more paper. I've got my sky coming together, and I'm just going to have another go with this. Now, as I often have said, you can do this. If I can do it, you can do it. But I'm barely touching it, okay? And I'm coming into land, making a mark, and then coming off. It's not like on, straight, and off. You've got to come in gently and skim the surface. So yeah, you can do this. If I can do it, you can do it. And it's fast. You can spend hours with a little brush blending away each little bit of the sky, or you can do this and just get the job done so that you can get on to another part of the painting. So there we are. I don't know how long I've been painting on this, but because it's a teaching a student here day, I don't video this all in one go, because I just can't. I have to pause. People have to eat. And tomorrow, yes, tomorrow. Well, prepare for tomorrow, because tomorrow Larissa will be painting. Not necessarily being videoed as she paints, but she will be painting, and you may see the painting at the end of the day. We're going to go back to the landscape part, or the salad, and I'm going to zoom you in a bit. Okay, so I have to decide what I'm going to do in the foreground. And I suppose the best thing to say is I'm going to keep it simple, because simple always works. Finding the brushes simple are those, right? Good. I don't always find the brushes. Sometimes I find brushes that I put down 6 months later. And then, of course, you can't pick them up because they've stuck to whatever it was they were next to. Sounds like I'm making that up, but it's absolutely true. But so far, I've never found one stuck to the cat. Right, so let's, a little bit of sculpting over here. Let's just, without thinking, just put the stuff on. Up and down, sideways, whatever. But occasionally throw in some darks. Probably haven't got enough paint on the brush, but there you go. Oh, no, that's okay. With a bit of light next to it to make it react. Like so, and you will find, after a while, things will start to appear. Because I've always said to people, if you go out in the countryside, look at stuff in the distance, and then think, how are those things constructed? Well, they're made out of blobs and shapes, and everything in the distance, particularly as you get older, is made out of blobs and shapes. You may not be able to focus on them, but you know what they are. And now I'm going to do a little bit of perspective there. Is it worth me zooming in on that? I wonder. I think I will. Okay, so I want some distance in there now. Several ways to do this. One is to just move your brush. Do I want that one yet? No. Is to just move your brush and mix it with the sky. like so. Like that. Because one thing you'll notice is that in the distance, the sky and the landscape start to become the same colour. Now, to a certain number of degrees, depends on conditions. But if you assume, not assume, that's the wrong word. If you paint your picture using the idea that there's a bit of a heat haze, maybe. You can have a heat haze on a coolish day too. It's just slightly warmer than the rest of the air. But as they come together, you see they blend. You can pull them right in together. I can continue doing this here. Now this is very subtle. You may not see it in the camera, but I don't know. We'll see in a minute. If I start picking up a little bit of paint from here and just taking it up into the sky there, and just so that I've got a variation of tints and tones. Let's pull that colour around here. I'm working on the idea that I might push. I'm doing it again. I always do this. I might push that further back. Okay, you can see it now. I might push this hill further into the distance, and the way I would do that again is just get some of this colour. This is mixing on the painting rather than the palette. Some people say you should never do that. I don't know where they get that idea from, but you can mix the paint any way you like. So you can mix it on your forehead if you want. So I'm going to push that right up into there to the point where the dark bit at the top eventually will be toned down even further. Until I get it the way I want it. That's almost right. But it's, you see, this, you can just see it, this is in front of this because it's darker. This is in front of that because it's darker. It's as simple as that. When you make things more contrasty, they come forward. Also, if you add more red to the green at the bottom, that will give the appearance of coming and hitting your eyes before anything else. Red and black are the same colour wavelengths, and they both react the retina the same way. That's why they use a red light in a photographic darkroom. Well, they used to. We don't probably have them nowadays. It's all digital. Okay, here's a little something for the younger people out there. Of course, when I was young, when I started graphic design, everything was done by hand, no computers. You had to draw and scribble and, produce artwork quite slowly compared to today. But also, if you wanted a photograph of something, you had to take the photograph, take the film out of the camera, take it to the pharmacy or chemist, fill out a form, and then about a week later it would come back and you could go and pick it up. So that's all gone, thank goodness. So I don't miss that. Nowadays you just point your camera and squirt, and if it isn't right, you squirt again until it does look right. Everything's changed. Okay, let's see. I'm going to invent a place. You see, I was like, when I was a kid, I was always fascinated by these clumps of trees on hills. And now I think I've got some drone footage that I took, and I will add it to this painting now. And as you can see, I'm surrounded by that kind of hill with trees on the top. Anyway, when I was a kid, I was fascinated. I always thought, you know, it's like, right, this will give you an idea. I always found them mysterious. Now, when I was not so young, in my early 30s, I lived in a village called Hartfield in East Sussex in England, right next to where A. Milne wrote all the Pooh Bear stories, Christopher Robin and all that stuff. So it was just literally just down the road. And in fact, I've been to the house that A. Milne lived in, and I've sat on their patio and drunk tea. So I used to take my kids to these places. There was a place called the 100 Acre Wood, and I used to take them there and sort of, you know, they were really into Winnie the Pooh. And I don't know whether it rubbed off on them, maybe it did. But it certainly had an effect on me. I don't know what it is. Why? Why would I find a pile of trees on a hill interesting? Who knows? Maybe I'm a bit weird. Right, well, I think there are people that would agree with that straight away. But anyway, I quite like being a bit weird. Now then, let's get a few other... Remember what I said about me rambling on about stuff? I have to decide. I'm going to leave this in, just so you know. But when I'm making a video, I go through quite a lot of anguish trying to figure out what I need to cut out and what I can leave in. Because if I left everything in, chances are the men in white coats would come and get me. Right, I've got to start building up my landscape. These two things aren't right. Okay, I always tell people, avoid repetition. So there's two perfect repeated shapes. We don't want those. And they're really difficult to get rid of. And usually I find the best way to get rid of them is like that. See, that's really hard. See? Now, if I can do that, you can do that. All I did was go, and it's gone. But I'm not in a rush there, because I look at that and I think, what can that turn into? Okay, what you don't want is a little island of trees, a little island of trees, a little island of trees. You know, people often do this. They'll do something like this. They'll have like, getting bigger, 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 and getting smaller, right? Now, that's sort of okay once in a while. But if you have one there, one there, and one there, and one there, and one there, right, it doesn't work. Countryside is so disorganised, which is why it's so interesting, I think. So let's see what we got. We got this shape coming down. I like that shape. I want to get rid of some of the white. So I'll just put anything in there. Doesn't matter what it is. All you got to do is shove it in and see what it turns into. Got to watch your scale too. So how far away is that? How big are those trees? How big are those trees? That type of tree, when they appear down here, they're going to be obviously much bigger. So this is just me showing you what that can look like. So I'm going to lose that. And this is how easy it is to lose it. So change your mind, there it is, gone. If you want to paint a picture that's got a panoramic view, use lots of long, sweepy shapes to trick the eye. It's all trickery. Go back a bit more. There's so many things to lock and unlock on this thing. Okay, I think, whoops. The older I get, the more I say whoops. Because basically I've been clumsy all my life. Okay, focusing. Good. Right, now there's a slight change in composition because I don't like certain things I'm seeing there. And these are the things that are quite tricky to explain. Why don't I like that shape? The reason I don't like it is because it's not telling us enough. Simple as that. It's just not descriptive. And the other thing I don't like I quite like this effect here. That's working quite well. But what is it? Is it a wall or is it just, I don't know what it is. It's something. It can carry on being something until I decide it's going to be a thing. Anyway, so let's get rid of this in here first. What are we going to do? I think I'm going to turn it into a larger pile of trees and shrubbery that actually reaches right down here. When you're doing things like this, the bottom edge isn't important because you can do this. Piece of paper. Clean up the bottom edge. Like that. It looks as though you've carefully stopped at that point. Of course I didn't. Now you don't need to. Right, this bush here is leaning that way. Everything's leaning that way. I think we should have a lean the other way. Maybe I should call a lot of these paintings the search for randomness in a landscape. So let's turn that into a little bit of a taller tree. Now, if I put some foliage floating above this dark shape, the brain will fill in the tree trunks that are too thin to see from that distance. So you don't need to paint them. You can if you want, if you really have to, but I quite like that effect. So I'm going to have another one there. Okay. I can add some really small tree trunks in there later if I decide to do it. So there we are, a little bit stronger. Okay, that sort of works. And then along here, maybe there'll be a gap. Do I want a gap? No, I don't want a gap. I'm going to pull this around that way. Leaving that bit between there and there, because then it adds detail that you're not painting, basically. It adds a little bit of mystery, and it's somewhere else to go in the painting. I always like to give people places to visit. It's like a little bit more brown on here now. So let's have something there, but I like the light, so I'm going to keep that light bit, but darken below it. See, now all of a sudden there's something through the trees. And then I think we'll take that up here, just fill that, and then worry about what it is later. Bit of a ridge, maybe there'll be a path, don't know. I've done rather a lot of paths lately. I've done a lot of paths lately. And in my Zoom lessons, which consist of mostly Americans, there are some Brits, we have interesting discussions about pronunciation. Like, I'm from the southeast of England, born in the southwest, but I say path. Everybody else that appears on the planet says path. And they say castle, and I say castle. Can't help it. It's the way I was taught to speak, I suppose. So we have quite fun conversations about, I'm going to put a path here. And I've always believed that when you're learning anything, be in a humorous frame of mind, because your brain will retain much more. I wonder if there's a record for painting 2 trees. But there's a couple of trees. There'll be more tree-ish in a minute. They will they will attain treosity, or bushery, whatever you want to call it. Let's have something there to connect them. And then I think we'll have a line there. And why, you may ask, do I want a line there? Well, it's that corny old answer again, and it's purely because I can, and I think it might look nice. So you've got to get it into your head that the brush will do a lot for you. See those two? I'm not even going to bother painting tree trunks on those because they just appear. What else can we do? So what's the eye doing as it goes in the painting? We go back just a couple of inches further. Right, now, so what have we got? We look at it. We're drawn to the light bit of sky. We can't help that because it's in the golden spot, above centre to the right. This is the sort of mysterious bit of the sky at the top here. Can you see where I'm pointing? No, you can't. Right, so dark bit of sky for the mystery, a little bit of light there, and by the time I finish that'll be even lighter, and there'll be more light here. But for the landscape itself, what am I doing? I want to lead people along lines, so they're going along here. But then I want them to go from this ridge across to the distance. So I'll make the distance more alluring in a moment. Okay, so what can I do now to get people to stay in my painting? I've got this hill which has a light area around the side, which I'll make lighter in a moment. The reason I do that, by the way, I'm trying to do that, is to take away the bits that dangle so they don't accidentally touch the painting. So I got some light on this hill. Let's make it a little bit more exaggerated. It brings you down here. So I'm going to get a bit of a curl in that. You can hear me moving around, I think, and the reason is I'm going from here back to the camera so I can look in my viewfinder. Okay, so we've got a light area coming down there, which hopefully will catch the eye. That's okay. Not quite what I want, but it's getting there. There's two ways to do the top edge. Either it's dark against a light sky, or it's got a bit of light hitting the top. And at the moment, I'm not quite sure what it's doing. In fact, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to just darken the top a touch. Now I've got a little anomaly, which of course you can't see, that this side of the brush has a hair that's poking out further than the other side, I think. And that's got one as well. So the lesser of the two evils is this side. So I'm just going to add a little bit of darkness there. Just a touch, just to make it zing against the sky. Now ultimately, there may be a very light sky, light cloud behind the hill there. So I'm going to plan ahead and just darken it there as well, otherwise it won't work. Okay, that's coming along. Okay, so we've got a little bit of distance through there. Do I want it to have the same kind of distance as the other side? Don't think it would, because this is closer up here. All right, I'm going to leave that. Well, I'm not actually going to leave it. I'm going to strengthen it. Not much. Just that much. Okay, so this hill and that hill are on one plane, and then everything above this dark line going back is on another. So let's make that more obvious. Let's put a little something there going up the hill. There we are. Now, again, until I finish and do some close-ups, you won't see the fact that the trees here disappear. They go over the edge like that, and they almost go around a corner. You'll see that in a second. So over here, then we've got this that's working well from what I can see behind my camera. That's looking quite cool. And below it, right, so we've got this little thing, whatever it is. Maybe it needs to be slightly, no, I don't think, so my brain talking to itself. I think we should have a round tree there, and maybe one there, but never three. 3 is the dreaded number. In fact, that needs to have something else to it. That's just not right. Okay. Now, I might leave that open here for people to go around and look over there. Sounds crazy, I know, but it's a sort of subliminal thing. In other words, I'm not trying to block off anything, but I could entice people to go around there more. It may work, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And that is to put a little bit of a curl there. With some trees on it, if the brush would start working again. So there's something over there. There we are. Blobbery. There's nothing like a bit of blobbery. Right, so that's sort of filled that up quite nicely. Still a bit to do on the other side, although it is coming together. Right, so down here, bottom right. Okay, right, so we got that light area. Now I might turn that into, now what will I turn it into? It's either going to be a path that goes off the other side of these trees and briefly appears. Okay, that's what I'll do. Right, so I'll just put up a little bit of tone here. Quick white, just to get a sort of half tone in between. You can, it's perfectly acceptable in a painting to have canvas or the board showing through. A painting doesn't have to be, you know, a surface that's totally plastered with paint. As long as there's some paint on it, it's a painting. So there's something not right there. It doesn't actually explain to the viewer what it's trying to be. So let's give it a nudge. So the first thing, it's a good thing about paper, you see, you can make any shaped brush that you want. So I want this a bit like a squeegee, so that I can push that way. Okay, that makes it slightly more acceptable, and I can give people another way to go through there, maybe. Possibly. Maybe not. Who knows? I don't know. I never know. Right, so here, let's have some shrubs. Same deal as the clouds. Nice and random. The more random, the more like nature it will appear. Okay, so there's something, maybe it's a chalk path going behind the trees, and that starts to fade here, so let's pull it back a little bit there, and then it goes off over this way. Now, it doesn't have to be a straight line. It could have a wiggle. Let's have a wiggle. There we are. And then, so it doesn't look like I've just sort of made a mark. I mean, that's okay to make a mark, but some of that path would be hidden. Like, let's hide the difficult bit. Let's hide that bit. So we know the path goes there and then it appears over here. But again, there's something in the way. All adds to this feeling of complexity, when all it really is the opposite. So there's a path. It doesn't matter where it goes, takes you into the painting. In fact, I could give you a little hint just to pull people across. So we've got this light stuff through here and that. So maybe it does connect over there. Maybe I should just take that down a bit. When I say take it down, I mean down towards white, I suppose. Okay, sort of okay. Right, so what's going to happen here? I don't know. There's a hair that no, that's my fingernail made that mark, I think. So there's an accidental shape here. How does that look in the painting? Right, I like that, but I think it should connect. See, when you're doing this tomorrow, you're going to be painting away, and I'm going to be probably standing there, And every mark you make, I'll let you go to a certain point, and then I'll interject and just say, don't do that, do this. Wipe that off, move that there, all that stuff. With humour, so that it sticks, you know? The idea I always work on is that if someone tells you a joke and it's really funny, you'll remember it, you know? You don't remember the bad jokes. I don't, anyway. But actually, some people would argue with that. They'd say none of my jokes are funny. Right, now what I'm doing here, I always like doing this, right? So I'm going to solve that little problem there and have a hovering tree. Now, it could be a tree that's a tree line that's going across, but it isn't. I'll show you what it is, because I really like this effect. Always liked it, and it's starting to appear in a lot of my paintings. And this is where, the only time I use a really small thin brush called a rigger. That's a rigger. And all you've got to do to bring this tree to the same place as that is just this. Like that. It adds another dimension. So simple, isn't it? And if, while I've got this, I could look at a few other trees. Like maybe over here, it may not be necessary, but we could just add a little line in there, just to, and possibly there's one there that doesn't have much in the way of foliage on it, and it's tiny little things like that that start to build up a painting. Maybe a hint of one there too. The advantage to starting at the top and going down is that you use gravity, and you can also guide where you're going. You don't have to paint a tree that way just because it grows that way. Paint it the easy way. I might even add another one, as long as I don't get too carried away. Maybe I'll put one. Okay, so we've got one there. Tell you what, let's have one here. So, in other words, the top of the tree. Always remember, of course, this is tonalism. You don't have to paint every leaf. So it's already got some interesting shapes. There's that there, which we can just sort of exaggerate a bit there. And another one there. Easy peasy. And that may be it for the landscape, unless I change my mind, which, as you know, does happen. There's something there I'm not happy about, so I'm just going to mush that up a bit. If there's a part of a painting you see that you don't really, or you think you're going to struggle with, the beauty of tonalism is you just put it in a shadow. That's why it's called tonalism. One reason, anyway. Okay, so we've got tree. I think we'll just have that. Just something here. Right, don't really like that. Now with the rigger, you can also, although it's sometimes best to use a piece of wood across it so you can lean on it, but I'm not going to. Well, there's no reason other than that it's Thursday. I can do it this way, which you may be able to see. So what I do is put my hand on the bottom edge of the shelf and then use that as like a brace. So I can put in some little tiny things, which of course aren't anything really. They're just dots. Of course it'd help if I had a bit more paint on the brush. Maybe I'll leave that to get sticky overnight and then do it. That sometimes works. Okay, so we've got, I think I'm sort of happy. There's a lot of nothingness down here. So do I rely on just the texture of the ground? That's a big question, isn't it? So I think the only thing I will do, because I like that, whoops, is I might just extend that. So it comes almost to our feet, obviously exaggerating the width of whatever it is. It's just a change of plane, I suppose. Bit of a slope. It may look good, it may not, it does. Good. Right, so any more to the sky? I think that actually might be it. I was thinking of doing a bit more, but I don't know that I need to. There is one thing, this cloud, looks nice with the light on it. What I don't like is the fact that it's basically just a few big sort of humps. And I think I'll just change that slightly. There's a lot to do there. It's definitely a lot to do there. So that might have to be tomorrow. I may put this on Facebook today just to show people that I'm still alive. I haven't put anything on for a long time. In fact, I haven't put up a YouTube. No, I don't like that. I haven't put up a YouTube since. Good question. Definitely 2 heading towards 3 weeks ago. The only thing I'm going to do now before it dries too much, because I want it to dry a little bit before I fiddle with it, and that is using a piece of paper just to get some texture on the trees. So that means I've got to zoom in even more, just so you can see how easy this bit is. Okay, and it's literally just that, just a bit of texture, just sort of dab it a few times. Simple as that. And that means that when I glaze the painting with another colour, supposing I decide I want to get a really pale green glaze over this, it'll affect the lighter bits more than the darker bits. So I'm basically making little holes in the paint. Ooh, I don't like that one. Little holes in the paint to accept the glaze when I put it on. Okay, so I think that's it really. I mean, I don't know that I need to do any more. Do I even like that? Not totally. So one thing, and then I'm going to stop, if I can find that brush again. Which one was it? Was it that one? Oh yeah. Right, the texture's okay, but I don't know whether I want it that strongly, particularly on a tree that's that far away. So I'll just simplify that down a little touch. And I promise the very last thing I'm going to do. And before I go on this video, I just want to say I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks if you're still here. So yes, so I've got dark tree trunks, but of course you can make light tree trunks as well. So this is always fun. So let's have a little one there, and there, and there. It's just a hint. And again, it doesn't matter about the bottom edge because that always gets wiped. Okay, so here's so again in the distance we've got a light coloured thin tree trunk just showing through there. Very small, but they build up. And then in this, which is a bit boring, let's have a whole load of these little things. So that's obviously the spooky wood. See, when I say the bottom edge doesn't matter, you can just nip it off. There we are, that's it, now I'm done. So yeah, if you'd like to subscribe to my channel, I would appreciate that greatly. And share it as much as you like, make comments, be polite, because I am. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.